How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Apples and Ginos Fantasy Hockey Podcast. My name's Josh Hutchinson, and I'll be your host. Today, Mark and I will be discussing best ball strategies and looking at trends and observations from our in-house A&G Best Ball leagues. Let's get things started. Mark, I'm workshopping little taglines for right before the intro music. I was just going with the cliche "Let's go" last year, and I feel like that's such like a fuckboy thing to say. What do we think? We could keep workshopping.
Well, we'll brainstorm. It'll be good.
Yeah, for sure. All right, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing really well. It's the end of July, and I've got like 11 concurrent hockey drafts going on, which is weird, but great at the same time. So I'm doing well. How about you?
Good. I'm in 4, and I was feeling overwhelmed by that. So I can only imagine what it feels like to have 11 going on at once. Just constant pings all day long.
It was too many. It was a mistake, but live and learn.
So today we are going to talk about best ball leagues. We have a ton of them running, obviously, in through Apples and Ginos right now. I mentioned that off the top. Mark has been developing a tool based on the results from the best ball leagues. And that will be released relatively soon. But if you are interested in getting a sneak peek, head on over to the YouTube and watch this if you're listening to the audio feeds right now, because we will have a visual of the tool up during this podcast, just to kind of give you a sneak peek of what is to come there. So yeah, head over to the YouTube, subscribe the video, like as many videos as you can. Helps us out a ton. It really does help us out. I'm not joking about that. I will reiterate for sure. But Mark, let's dive into this shit now. If you are new to best ball, I'll just go over a little bit of what a best ball league is. So best ball is a little bit different than a typical league. You basically draft the way that you would a typical fantasy hockey league. We do them on Fantrax. But the first thing that's unique about our leagues is that there's no dual or try eligibility. Everyone has just one position, and you draft the way that you normally would, but it's a set and forget type of league. So you draft all of your players. You do have a bunch of bench players. So in our leagues, we've got 2 centers, 2 left wings, 2 right wings, 4 D spots, 2 skater spots, 2 goalie spots, and then 10 bench players. Every day, every scoring day, Fantrax automatically picks your best players at those positions. So your 2 best centers, your 2 best left wings, your 2 best right wings, and it counts those points, and that goes towards your roto total. And then at the end of the year, whoever has the most points wins. Basically, it's pretty simple. Our scoring system, we do it pretty similar to the couple. We've got goals are worth 4.5 points, assists are worth 3. Shots on goal are 0.5. Blocks are 0.5 as well. Hits 0.25. Shorthanded points 1 point. Wins for a goalie are 2 points. Shutouts are 2 points. Saves are 0.3, and goals against are negative 1.5. Some slight variations there, but very similar to Kakupful scoring. So Mark, why don't you talk to us a little bit about why this is better than typical mock drafts? Because we're doing mock drafts, we're doing live streams, doing mock drafts. There are a lot of other fantasy hockey podcasts that are doing mock drafts at this point. Why do you like best ball more than a typical mock draft?
There's two main reasons I would say. One is these best ball drafts are slow drafts. Now that doesn't mean that you can't do a mock draft as a slow draft. I think some people are doing that, and so if you're doing your mock draft as a slow draft, then it's the same benefit. But I think a lot of people like to do them on a short clock, which in a sense is fine because that's what you're going to have to deal with when your real leagues get started. But I feel like when you're just trying to feel out the players and where people are going to get drafted, it's a lot better to do it as a slow draft. Everyone gets a chance to spend a few minutes or as much time as they want, really thinking about where a player should be picked, who's the best player at that time. And so it just generates a little bit higher quality ADP, I think. You don't get those outliers where someone's under pressure and just picks whoever's in front of them type of thing. The second main reason why I like them is because we do actually have a small prize pool in these best ball leagues. It's a $5 US entry fee, which is not very much, but it is enough to at least make you think that you've put some money into it and you have a chance of winning money in the end. So that sort of weeds out like the hot take or fun picks where people just pick a player because they want to make some sort of bold statement about what they think is going to happen in the future. Well, you're a lot less likely to do that if you're trying to not lose your money. And so, again, it's a modest entry fee with a modest prize, but it's just enough to sort of keep people focused on the task, which is drafting the best players. And it's a ton of fun. I've been enjoying it. It's really helped me get my head into what this season is going to look like. And with any luck, maybe I will win a little money. Maybe you can win a little money. Uh,
Yeah.
and then maybe you can tell us a little bit about or get the discussion started on how we think you can go about winning some of these best ball leagues.
Yeah, just another point about like collecting in-house ADP. Obviously, no ADP is going to be perfect. You're going to have outliers. Even with the best ball, like collecting just from best ball leagues, there is like a slight because because you only have single eligibility. It will kind of change the way that people are drafting a little bit, but I still think that it's a little bit more accurate than typical mock drafts because you don't have guys like you said at the end of the draft going like, oh, I'm going to pick Yarmir Yager with my last pick or stuff like that, just to be a goof. And then like it's better than Yahoo ADP because Yahoo typically is, I mean, you get a lot of people. Mock drafts are so easy to enter into for Yahoo, and a lot of people will enter and then just leave, and then it ends up being CPUs picking just whoever Yahoo has projected, and their projections are always god awful. So I do like this a little bit, and Mark is collecting the ADP data, so we've got a little bit at this point because what are we at 16 best ball leagues right now that are running? It's crazy. It hasn't even been a week yet since we started. I don't think.
Yeah, we're filling League 16 right now. There's 15 on the go.
Yeah, that's crazy. All right, so in terms of strategy, so like I mentioned off the top, these leagues are not active leagues, so you can't add or drop players. So you really have to trust your draft strategy. So it is fun in that way. Yeah, so you just leave. It's a set and forget. The CPU picks your best players every night to count your points towards your season long total. Luck is definitely plays a role in this because obviously if a player gets injured, they're just on your roster and you can't really do anything about it. So I mean that does that hampers you a little bit in some cases, but obviously everyone's taking the exact same risk. And then in terms of timing, when your skaters score their points, obviously there's going to be nights where where certain people line up with each other. You have to be strategic about the players that you take, and whether their schedules uh, line up or kind of align themselves, whether they kind of offset each other in terms of when their teams play. And yeah, I think having good projections, like I mentioned, is pretty important. Our the platform ADPs are always awful, like I mentioned, and I mean, we're all making projections. Mark has his done. Nate's, I believe, are available now. Mine are done. I will be making them available relatively soon. Just kind of working out the kinks, and then Blake is working on his as well. And I think we're gonna probably have an aggregate apples and Genos ADP that comes out at a certain point. So if you're kind of looking for, if you're not sure whose projections you prefer, we're gonna have we're gonna be releasing them kind of averaged across the four of us. So if you're into that kind of thing, that will be available as well at some point. So Mark, you've written an article on best ball strategy. I believe you did that last year. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about some other strategic tips for best ball?
Sure. So I did write an article. It's on the Apples and Genos website. If you're in the Discord and you would like to have me point you in the direction of that article after listening to this episode, then just find me in there and I can point you in the right direction. A Google search will also take you there. Um, but I think the single biggest takeaway for me after doing some research on it is that, and you alluded to this when you were talking, Josh, the schedule and thinking about the schedule is just so critical when you're trying to formulate which player to take and put together your team. You absolutely, like any type of fantasy hockey league, you want to maximize your games played. And when you're in a regular league, you do that through streaming. But of course, this is not an active league, and so you have to sort of pre-plan your streamers at the time of the draft. The draft is a lot deeper than your typical league, and so you're basically filling the bottom of your roster in advance with your streamers. And like any good streamer, they have to have a good schedule. So you really, really need to be thinking about that right up front. You can't just be trying to guess which player you think is the best. In many cases, taking a player that is not as good will still produce a much better outcome for you if they have a better schedule. And as I talk about in the article that I wrote, I actually built a model that would go through and try to compute various total fantasy points for teams. And it showed, as you would expect, that taking worse players can actually produce more points if those players have an uncorrelated schedule with the rest of your team. And it's very easy to understand why that's happening. They're playing on a night when no one else is playing, you capture all of their points. Whereas if you have a bunch of players all playing on the same night, your players might perform well, but eventually you're just going to be pushing people onto your bench. And so you have to subtract those bench points from your total points to find out what your marginal increase in points is. So it's hugely beneficial to have players with non-correlated schedules. So it's important to think about that when you're making your picks at the top of the draft. Though less critical, you really do want to get good players at the top of the draft, obviously. But if you can find a good player on a team that plays on a lot of off nights, then that player is going to be more valuable than the player who has a similar expected fantasy points but plays on a lot of busy nights. But the bottom of the roster is where it becomes super critical, and you're going to be essentially trying to build in your streamers there. And so what you'll want to be doing is, say you're adding your fourth left wing to your roster. what you want to do is you want to look at your options and see which one, uh, you know, find a player that you hope is okay, but then take a look at among those players which one plays on a team that does not have a lot of games on the same day as your other left wingers. And so I've got this same day games played matrix that you can see here. I've sort of been distributing this in the Discord and pointing people in this direction as a really useful way to help you sort out which teams you should be targeting. It's simple. You take a look at the teams that you've already got on your roster. So if you've got left wingers who play for, say, Anaheim, Boston, and Buffalo, then you'll want to, when you're going to add your fourth left winger, try to find a player who plays on a team who doesn't play on a lot of the same nights as those teams. And this same day game played matrix is very helpful for doing that and will help you maximize your games played, which is always very important in fantasy. I've got a couple of other schedule-related tools built into this, and I've sort of been distributing them on the Discord. A more simple one here, which just sort of shows which teams play on the most off nights. I think at this point everyone knows that a team like Anaheim is really good for that, but this just sort of shows a more comprehensive list. And you can see that Chicago is also very good, and it goes down from there. But then, a team like St. Louis is pretty terrible. Another kind of interesting thing that I've got is this, which is showing which teams play weak opponents on off days. So if you can really manage to find a player who sort of ticks all of the boxes, and also their off day games are against bad teams, it just sort of increases the chances that their points are going to be captured, or more of their points are going to be captured on light days, and increase your total score. So you can see that a team like Winnipeg here is actually really good. They're the best in the league for playing weak opponents on off days. And so these are sort of the three main tools that I use when trying to piece together which player plays for a team that I think will help me maximize my total fantasy points. And like I said, it's especially critical for those players that you're picking up in the late rounds. A point that I think that follows from this, but perhaps is not obvious and should just be stated, is it's a really good idea to avoid picking multiple players from the same team. And especially, most importantly, to avoid picking players who play at the same position on the same team. So don't take, for example, two left wingers from the same team. Their schedule is obviously going to be 100% fully correlated. They'll always be playing at the same time, and so you're reducing your total fantasy points. You'd be better off getting a worse player who plays on different nights, rather than doubling up on a player from the same team. So I think that's the biggest takeaway from the work that I've done on this. And if you start thinking about that, you'll go a long way to improving your performance in these best ball leagues.
I've definitely accidentally done that already in one of my best ball leagues. Drafted two guys from the same team at right wing, and then realized later, oh no, I should not have done that. But it is what it is. Like, that's the thing, is the best ball strategy is slightly different than it's not a ton different. So it still is like there is a lot of translatable practice for your redraft leagues, but there are some slightly different strategies, like you mentioned there. That same day matrix, games played matrix, is so awesome. It's a really great visual. It's going to be really cool for people to use, and it is honestly like it. There are picks that I've made, like you showed it to me a few days ago, and there are picks that I've made that would have been completely different if I hadn't been looking at that matrix. So it is extremely helpful. I think that's my favorite part of your tool. So in terms of positional scarcity, we'll just have a quick discussion on that. So obviously, I mean, as per usual, centers are a dime a dozen. There's so many centers available, and especially now that when you get rid of the dual eligibility, it seems like there's so many more centers. Honestly, a good strategy is to fade centers as much as you can, because you are going to be able to get good centers later in the draft. In terms of goalies, I mean, yeah, there's positional scarcity there, but I mean, I mean, we'll talk about goalie strategy a little bit later. Obviously, still on the zero G train, but it is slightly different because you can't. I mean, you have to kind of look at every goaltending situation and kind of make an educated guess on who you think is going to get volume, because that's really the most important thing with best ball, is just to accumulate as many points as possible. So getting someone that's going to get volume is preferred, obviously. And then in terms of defenders, I think we have two different schools of thought on this. We've talked about this on our mock draft episode. I like to shore up defense early in points leagues like this. Mark likes to fade them a little bit more, but obviously there is some positional scarcity with D, because you have 4 defense spots to accumulate points in these leagues. But I mean, there's really only so many defensemen that are going to be premium point getters. Only so many power play 1 defensemen in the league. Only so many great 5v5 offensive producers. I do think it's important to get a few of those guys relatively early, not necessarily right away, but shore up that. Yeah. Anyways, I think using at least perceived value over replacement is important when it comes to defensemen, for sure. And then in terms of wingers, you've noticed a slight change in the trends of wingers this year. Typically, right wing has been a position of scarcity here, but what have you noticed over your 11 drafts that you're a part of so far, Mark?
Yeah, so as you're suggesting, I did find something a little bit different. I've always sort of started with the baseline assumption that right wing is going to be the most scarce forward position. But this year, at least the way that the position eligibility is set up on Fantrax, I'm really finding that right wings are easier to find than left wings. And so I've got this plot here that if you're on YouTube, you'll be able to see it. And what it's showing is that in the first 3 rounds, there are more left wings being picked than right wings. And that certainly matches my own experience. There's quite a few really high-end left wingers available in the first few rounds. But then I find that it does fall off, and after about round 5 is what I've noticed, and I think the data seems to be suggesting that other managers are finding the same thing. The left wingers who are available just don't look too appetizing. And unlike previous years, I'm easily finding right wingers that I am interested in straight through to round 10, 11, and beyond. So I'm actually finding it a lot easier to draft right wing than left wing this year, which is strange. And so I mean, one of the things that I've done in a few of the drafts is just really loaded up on left wing in the first few rounds. Maybe come out of the first 5 rounds with 3 left wingers, which is not something I would have done other years, and try to capture 3 of those really premium left wingers, and be a little bit more confident that I would be in other years that I can find right wingers later on that I do like. And I like I said, this so far the data are coming in and suggest that other people are also not feeling too thrilled about the left wingers that they're seeing, sort of in those, say, rounds 6 through 11. And then you see more left wingers being picked later in the draft as people sort of try to plug the holes in their roster.
Yeah. Yeah, I've noticed that too. I'm only in a couple of the drafts so far. I wanted to wait until I got my projections done to really dive into the best ball leagues. But yeah, no, I 100% agree. I noticed this in my first draft. I didn't pick my second left winger until round 9, and we were kind of in the Jared McCann tier, which is fine. But I mean, you'd like something a little bit better than that with a little more upside. Jake DeBrusk, I got in round 11 in that same draft. That's a guy that that has upside, but I mean, could potentially be like not really that exciting either. And then I don't know, you see guys like Michael Bunting around that range too. But really, other than that, like there's nothing. It's pretty dire, especially late in the draft if you're trying to pick like a third and fourth left winger to be slotting in and alternating. There's not a lot of guys where I'm like, oh yeah, I feel like I could take a swing on this guy. There's just not a lot of exciting names there. So yeah, I totally agree with that. And conversely, you see guys like in the 5th to 8th rounds, you see guys like Jordan Kyrou, Owen Tippett, guys that are a little bit more exciting on right wing. So yeah, I 100% agree with that. I've totally been noticing that. And then yeah, another thing I've noticed is, and maybe this is just a personal thing, but centers are getting faded for the most part. Obviously, I mentioned that before. That's to be expected. But the round with the highest percentage of centers being taken so far, as you can see in the graphic on the YouTube, is round 3, which is over 50% of the players being taken in round 3 are centers. So I'm typically someone that likes to fade centers, but I've actually had a difficult time resisting guys in the 3rd round that are available. Guys like Crosby, Barkov, Jack Eichel that end up at the top of my draft board in round 3, even if they're my second center. So I've been finding myself picking earlier in the draft. So I get a guy like McKinnon or Matthews in the first few picks, which is great. Obviously, not complaining. But in round 3, when it comes back around to me, I'm just like, I want to fade centers, but I feel like I can't. Like I feel like I have to take one of these guys. I don't know, Mark. Have you been feeling that way too?
That has been my go-to strategy is pick up my first center in round 3. And so pull up my draft history here, and you can see, where is he? Right here, Mr. Jack Eichel. He's been a go-to. I've picked him in 4 of the leagues, and every one of those has been in the 3rd round. And yeah, assuming that I've got 2 wingers in the first 2 rounds, I've been targeting Jack Eichel as my first center in the 3rd round. And then I've found that from there you can hit pause on centers for, I don't know, another 3 or 4 rounds. And then there will still be lots of really, really great names at center available once you get down around 7, 8, something like that, and start filling out my centers down there. Along that line, my most drafted player is actually Trocheck here. And you see, I've got him in
Love it.
6 out of 11 leagues, and picking him up pretty late. And you know, people are pretty excited about Panarin this year. He's been going, you know, around the end of the 1st round, but his center just drops way, way, way down the list for some reason. And I don't know, my projections are pretty high on Trocheck, and so
Yeah.
I'm pretty excited to be picking him up later. And let's just pull him up here.
Yeah, my projections are high on him too. I have him for almost a point per game this year, which would be the first time that he's ever done that in his career. But it just like everything seems like it's lining up. I mean, I don't see them breaking that line up. Him and Panarin and Laugh. were looked really great together. And I just yeah I don't see them breaking up. And Panarin with this newfound want to shoot the puck. It makes a big difference for that line, and he's become a goal scorer. So I don't know that his shot volume will stay at the same levels next year, but I do think that there is a shift in his I mean the way that he's playing, which is very interesting. But
Yeah.
yeah, you brought up Trocheck here. What are you noticing?
Well, I just wanted to point out how late he's going and how many times I've taken him, but also just sort of the utility of having good uh, data about the draft that you're participating in. So you can see that I took him in the very first Best Ball League, and I was happy to take him at pick number 56. But then it's become pretty clear that I can wait longer than that. So I've also picked him at 64, 69, 68, 69.
Nice.
And I think he just provides, that is a very nice pick, I think. And yeah, I think he provides a ton of value there. And he's definitely, as you saw, he's my most targeted player so far in these drafts.
Yeah, his stock is definitely rising because in previous years you could get him in like past pick 100. And like I assumed that his stock would rise just because he's so solidified with Panarin on the power play and 5v5. But I do think that he's still not getting enough respect. Like Vinny Trope or whatever, I don't know what he's got to do to get the respect of people. He had such a great playoff too, which usually there's a little bit of bias towards guys that have really great playoff performances, whether or not that's sustainable. But Vinny Tro looked awesome in the playoffs, and I'm surprised that he's not getting a little bit more respect here. In terms of guys that I've drafted a fair bit, or guys that I've been targeting, Zach Werenski is a guy. Obviously, he's kind of an A&G. I mean, we're big on Zach Werenski here. Nate has been high on him for years. And he's been a guy that I've been slightly higher on than most others. I drafted him at 50 and at 52. His average ADP is 56.6, so not like it's not. I'm not drafting him super early, but I am finding it fairly easy to get him in the fifth round, and I'm pretty high on Zach Werenski. I have him for over 60 points this year, and he gets tons of blocks. He doesn't really hit. He gets tons of blocks, and he's a shot monster. He's one of the best shot producing defensemen in the league. Yeah, I just see him having a nice year, even if Columbus is not the most incredible team in the world. But yeah, I'm pretty high on him. Obviously, there's not a ton of data so far for me. I know actually, I noticed in the model, my username was slightly different between my two leagues, so it didn't collect my user data. I'm in there twice, but that's my bad. But anyways, some other guys that I have been targeting. John Carlson's another guy that I'm a little higher on than some. I have actually drafted him in both best balls. Aaron Ekblad is a guy that I'm higher on than some, just because I really see him having a bounce back this year. I just don't see anyone else getting power play one time on that team, so he just seems like the heir apparent for power play one. It just seems like the red carpet is rolled out for him. So I have him having a nice little bounce back season. And Travis Konechny is another guy that I've always been high on. And he's a guy that I think you can get fairly early, but maybe a little bit. Yeah. Anyways, you can get some pretty nice value for Travis Konechny as well. So that's something that I've been noticing. I don't know, what do you have on Konechny there? What are his trends?
Well, his average draft position is 47. Uh, it's hard to say that there is any clear trend. I mean, maybe he's mostly been going a little bit later recently. I see a few in the 50s, but then the most recent data point is back down to 46. So,
Yeah.
it's he's sort of right in that range. But for the most part, looks like the highest draft pick was 61, but that's a little bit of an outlier.
Yeah, that's very low. I would definitely be stoked to get him at 61. Are there any other guys that you've been drafting a fair bit?
Yeah, so I mentioned Trocheck. He's been one of my go-tos and my most drafted player. Uh, there's a couple of guys on Winnipeg that maybe I'll talk about just because I don't think they're getting any respect. And also, let's just go back to this, which shows that Winnipeg actually plays the most off nights against weak opponents, and their overall off night schedule is also pretty good. So they're a team that I've been sort of targeting a little bit. Also, because I think people just aren't really too enthusiastic about Winnipeg, which sort of depresses the value of some of their players. So, two guys that I've been targeting are Mark Scheifele, who you can pick up very late, or what I consider to be very late relative to his potential value. Uh, his most recent draft selection was 123. He's gone as high as 141, which I'm happy to say I was the manager that selected him there. But I've selected him as low as 95 and 99. So I'm still trying to feel out exactly where I can get him. I don't think I'll get him at 141 too many times. But it sounds like maybe you can get him over 100 every once in a while. And I think that's just fantastic value based on what you can expect just in terms of production from him. Again, you're going to be fading centers. He's a great target if you're fading centers. And that is only made even more true by the fact that he has a really helpful schedule. So for me, Mark Scheifele is a guy that I've been aiming for late in the draft once I figured out what was going on. You can actually see here, I didn't take him in any of the first three leagues, but then once I clued on to it, I've taken him in 5 of the next 7 leagues. So he's a guy that I've been after. I've also been after his teammate, which is a player who wasn't really on my radar until recently. But then I heard some people around here talking about him, and then I just sort of got pushed into taking him in our Cats League mock draft. When I realized I needed a center, he was center eligible in that draft. And my projections were just telling me that he was the best player available, so I just sort of took him. But since then, I've looked into him a little bit, and I'm actually kind of excited about Gabriel Velarde. You can get him even later. His average draft position is around 133. He's gone as late as 164. Unfortunately, I can't claim to be the manager who got him there. Well done, Nolan M. Yeah, I think this guy is probably going to get top line, top power play. Again, has fantastic schedule benefits. And my model is pretty enthusiastic about his point rates as well. I think in addition to the sort of negative Winnipeg vibes, though, I think another thing that's probably hurting him is his injury history. And so he just hasn't played a lot of games, which takes him off of people's radar or just make other people worried about him getting injured again. And that's a valid concern. Like, this guy has really not played a full season. So I haven't reached the point with him that I consider him a perpetual injury risk. I think my model says I'm getting great value for him where he's being drafted without even baking in any potential upside. This is like a 24-year-old, I think, who's being put in the best position that he's ever been in. I'm pretty enthusiastic about Gabe Velarde. Fingers crossed that he stays healthy this year.
Yeah, I wouldn't consider him injury prone either. Like, I don't think that there's enough data on the guy. Like, he's only really been a regular NHLer for 2 seasons now. Before that, he was kind of a tweener. So I feel like, yeah, I mean, I'm also really high on Gabe Velarde. He's been I mean, a high efficiency guy in terms of getting points for the last. I mean, in his limited time in the NHL, not sure how translatable that's going to be over an 82 game season, but he does it seems like there's enough data to feel like he could be a guy that just is a high efficiency shooter. Jeez, that was a mouthful. And Mark Scheifele's the same. Like he's a guy that it makes total sense that you're picking him a fair bit if you're fading centers, because he seems to be a guy that always gets kind of pushed late, and he is honestly one of the most consistent point getters in the league. Like year after year, you look at his stats, you look at his underlying stats, and they're almost identical every single year. So yeah, I think Mark Scheifele is in a good spot, and just with their schedule and like you said, like they're one of the most ideal teams to be picking from in this style of league, especially. So the I like those picks a lot.
Just to provide one final thought on Gabe Vilardi here, I've thrown up my own personal projection for him, or my model's projection for him, and you can see it's projecting him for 33 goals and 26 assists. Now, my model is going to be taking 2 years worth of data to make that, and that will include time that he spent in Los Angeles. And you can see that last year he actually scored at a 38 goal rate and 24 assist rate. So there's a bit of a goals upside baked into my projection. And, that doesn't really factor in the fact that he could now be taking over top power play. So I feel like there's even more upside to go from there. So I don't know. He wasn't really someone that was on my radar, but now that I've sort of looked into him a little bit more, he's a guy that I'm actually kind of excited about. You can get him late. He's got a great schedule. Hopefully he stays healthy. All right. I'll mention a couple of other guys that I've been targeting. The next one I'm going to talk about is Charlie McAvoy. And I'll bring him up because he sort of fits in with my sort of preferred way to draft defensemen, which I know is not what you like to do, and so feel free to offer criticism after I'm done my little rant here. But I wrote an article that just spells out exactly what I like to do when drafting defensemen, and basically it's based on years of experience where I find that my projections will always produce what I consider to be sort of unpopular choices that are populating the top of the list. And so I like to start by finding an unpopular guy who's in, say, the top 12 of my list. And this year that seems to be Charlie McAvoy. I don't know why, but other people are not especially high on him. And you can get this guy pretty late. You can see his ADP is 71, and there are certainly a lot of defensemen off the board by the time pick 71 comes around. And for my projections, that puts him in the top 12, which I like to try to find a guy who's, assuming that you're in a 12-team league, I like to try to find a guy who is in that top 12 that I can get. And then from there, I'd start to build out my defense with other unpopular, crusty defensemen who are, maybe they're the top power play on a bad team, or maybe they're second power play, but they get a lot of peripherals or something like that. But I wanted to include Charlie McAvoy here just because, for me, he's sort of the tip of where I like to start drafting defensemen, and I've been picking him a lot. You can see that I've got 5 shares of him. He's my second most drafted, among a few others, after Vincent Trocheck. And then I added one. Sorry, I forgot.
You no, that's
want
great.
to object to
I'm not. I don't object at all. One point that I was going to make is I'm finding this year so far, at least so far, that there are a lot of defensemen that I'm higher on that are going much later than I would value them. So I do feel like there is a little bit more value this year in like the mid-round defensemen, so guys in the Charlie McAvoy tier, I mean, Seth Jones is always a guy that gets no respect that I'm way higher on than most. I mentioned a couple guys, but John Carlson, Zach Werenski. There are just a number of guys, and Aaron Ekblad, I mentioned him too, that I feel like are going to have nice little seasons that you can get a little bit later. So there is definitely an argument for fading defensemen, I think, a little bit further than maybe in previous years. Anyways, you continue, Mark. You were going to talk about one more guy.
I did. I wanted to add this was a last minute addition to the list just because I remembered something that you said, and so this was just going to give you a chance to comment, really. But when I think two pods back, I made a comment suggesting that I don't like drafting players from Carolina just because you can't trust where they're going to end up in the lineup. And so I said I don't like drafting anyone other than Sebastian Aho. And then when we did our Cats League draft, I ended up taking Svechnikov. And you made the comment that you think that the dynamic might be changing in Carolina. You think that they're not as deep as they have been in the past. They might not be able to just sort of scatter their best players all over the place and doom them to poor ice time. You think it might be the year that everything sort of comes together, which would be interesting. I feel like with Svechnikov, people might be finally reaching the point where they're fed up with him. He's never going to do what they imagined he would do. Not to mention the fact that they're just sort of fed up with Carolina. And so this, for the first time ever, like I've never had Svechnikov on any team, I don't think. And I've got 4 shares of him so far in 11 drafts. I'm wondering if maybe you're right, Josh. Maybe this is the year that everything is different in Carolina, and I hope that Svechnikov finally has his breakout and succeeds. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I might is definitely a key word because Rod Brindamore is kind of, does seem like he's a bit of a hard-headed guy that is just going to stick with his strategy. But I just don't think that they have the depth that they've had in previous years, like you mentioned. There is a clear top 4 forwards on that team, so I imagine that they're going to have to load up that top power play with Necas, Svechnikov, Jarvis, and Aho. They're going to have to. So that inherently will increase the ice time for those guys. I also just feel like Svechnikov is probably going to play on the top line. You don't have Teuvo Teravainen anymore as an option in the top 6. You don't have Stefan Nason to play on the power play. And they didn't really add. Like, they didn't add anybody. So, I mean, obviously you throw Brad Nadeau in the mix. I think he's a guy that's going to be in the lineup. But I just think that I don't know. I feel like they just don't they don't have the luxury that they've had in previous years. So his hand may be forced. Also, Carolina has stunk in the playoffs perennially. Like, that's coming from a Leafs fan. Obviously, I'm pretty self-aware that the Leafs are awful in the playoffs, but Carolina really haven't done a ton better. They've had some conference finals runs, but every time they make it there, they get stomped. I just feel like the strategy is going to have to change a little bit. Maybe they need to lean on their big boys a little bit more. So I don't know. Anyways, that's it. It's a subjective projection, but I do feel like that's not a bad thought to have on Svechnikov. So in terms of targets at the end of the draft that you're taking swings on, who are you picking late? Very late in these best ball drafts?
Yeah, so as I mentioned a bit earlier, it's a 24-round draft, and so your last picks are obviously not going to be your best players, and they're not going to be especially good players. What you're looking for are people who play on teams that have a lot of off-day games. So obvious candidates are Anaheim and Chicago. And so I'm going to name one player from both of these. I chose wingers, just because wingers are even more difficult to find. There are still some great centers uh, available in the very late rounds. Just mention in passing that you can get Tyler Seguin at the very end of your draft if you want. I feel like there's some upside with a Tyler Seguin in round like 24. But anyway, that's not what I'm going to talk about here. What I'm going to talk about is a duck and a blackhawk. And the first one is the one that I'm most interested in, and it's not even close. It's Mason McTavish. And keep in mind that these draft data are changing, and so maybe he will start to drift into a round that's above 20. I'll keep bidding him up probably if I have to, but you can see I've got him in round or at pick 233 and at pick 215 so far. He's been picked as high as 239, which is pretty nice. I think he's basically, if he's not the second best duck, he's in a pretty close tie for being the second best duck. And so, oh, you know what? I said I was picking wingers. I'm mistaken. He is a center, not a winger. But still, I'm adding this guy wherever I can at the end of my draft, and he hasn't played a lot of games, so I think that might be partly why he's flying under the radar a little bit. But my model is pretty high on him in terms of what you might expect him to do. He's projected, as you can see here, for over 50 points. He'll take maybe 3 shots a game. He provides some hits and blocks. And, this is a super young guy. I would say if you're going to take the under or over, you got to be taking the over on this projection. When you factor in his schedule, plays on the best team in the league for schedule advantage, this is a guy that I just love adding at the very end of my draft. Before I move on to my next guy, maybe, Josh, any comments on Mason McTavish?
Yeah, I totally agree. My projection is very similar for him. I think the upside is there, and I think it's probably a good strategy to be picking a guy late in the draft that's on, like you said, the team with the most off nights, and the guy that's probably getting the least amount of respect, that has the most offensive upside on that team. And that does seem to be Mason McTavish. So I like that pick a lot.
All right. The next guy I'm going to talk about plays for the Blackhawks, and I have seen him starting to drift up, and so he might not be a proper candidate for a 20-plus pick, but I'm going to talk about Philip Kurashev. Another youngish guy, who seemed to really take off with Connor Bedard. Now, is there any guarantee that he'll hold on to that spot or that he'll be good in it? No, nothing is guaranteed. We're talking about a pick after 200 here. But if you're looking for a right wing on a team that has a great schedule at the end of the draft, and he could potentially be playing alongside one of the best players in the world, I think he could do a lot worse than Philip Kurashev.
Yep, totally agree. Totally agree. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good swing. I have a few guys like I have a few names that aren't necessarily guys that have the best schedule, but just guys that I've noticed that are going late that I think deserve maybe a little bit more respect. Pavel Zacha is one of them. He is likely going to play on the top line, top power play in Boston. It would be nice if he had left wing eligibility, but he is listed as a center, even though I do feel he'll almost definitely be playing left wing this year. Didn't really work out for him at center last year as well as they had hoped. And then with Elias Lindholm in the fold, that kind of just it's very likely he'll be playing left wing. But I do like Pavel Zacha. Eric Gustafsson is another guy that is going super late. And if you're fading defenseman, I think that's a guy that's going to get power play time in Detroit. So he's another interesting one if you need a D late. Anthony Duclair on the Islanders is a guy that is going very late as well, and he's a guy that I mean, I think he's going to get top line. I imagine they put him with Barzal and Bo Horvat. That seems to be what everyone's projecting. Does he get top power play too? I think it's possible. I don't think it's necessarily a given, but that's a guy that has potential, really nice upside, and a guy that's at right wing, which is nice. Shane Pinto, another guy that has a ton of upside that's going probably later than he should be going. But again, as he's center eligible, so I mean, yeah, if you're fading centers, he's a guy that I think deserves a little bit of respect. And then just a sneak peek to my projections. Morgan Frost is a guy that I'm a little bit higher on. He's obviously a center, but I see some good things coming for Morgan Frost this year. I don't think people are giving him a ton of respect. And then a guy that has not been drafted. This is a huge swing, and this is another one where I'm not necessarily projecting this guy to have a ton of points, but a guy that has really nice underlying numbers. That if there is a potential path for him to have a nice spot in the lineup, and that's Alex Laferriere. You might not even know who the hell this guy is, but he plays in the LA Kings. He played his rookie season last year, played on the third line basically the whole year. He has really nice underlying numbers. I think if there is an ice time increase, he's a guy that I would definitely be looking at for sure. So if you want, I'm talking like last pick of the draft, if you're wanting to swing hard on somebody, and all of the big rookie names are gone, that's a guy that I'd at least take a look at. There is a wing spot open in the top 6 because Quinton Byfield is moving back to center, and they just don't have the wing depth that they used to have. They lost Victor Arvidsson, so there's a spot open for a guy like Warren Fogle or a guy like Alex Laferriere. So I do think that there is a possibility that he could be a name that rises in terms of his fantasy stock this year. Are there any surprises here, Mark?
I would say surprises. I'm happy that you mentioned Alex Laferriere. When I saw his name, I smiled a lot. I have him in a dynasty league, and I am also hoping that he moves to the top 6 next season. I'm not sure that I'm going to be drafting him in a best ball league, but
No.
I get where your head is at, and my fingers are crossed that he does move up to the top 6.
So in terms of goalies, we'll touch a little bit on them, but I mentioned off the top, I do try to target volume even if the team situation isn't fantastic. So the guys that I've been looking at are Darcy Kemper, Jordan Binnington, guys that aren't necessarily like the premium goaltenders, but I have been trying to get at least a volume guy by like round 10, 11, 12. And I know that that's not a rule of thumb. Obviously, every draft is different, and you kind of have to assess where goalies are going. I don't want to be one of those guys that's like gotta draft a goalie by the 10th round, because that's just not the philosophy that I have. But yeah, so Darcy Kemper, Jordan Binnington, Dustin Wolf is another guy that I think is probably going to get volume that you could get really late in the draft. Obviously, Calgary's team situation, I think it's going to be pretty bad this year. Like they are, they're a weird team, and I just don't see them having a ton of success. But Dustin Wolf, I think, is probably their starter at this point. And then later in the draft,
do you have any concerns that
no,
Wolf is going to end up in the AHL again, or are you think it's guaranteed that he's NHL?
I don't think they have anyone else. Like I don't like, unless they sign somebody, because Markstrom's gone now. And then
they
Dan
signed somebody.
Bladar.
I can't remember what his name is even, which is terrible, but I know that they did sign another guy.
Oh, did
And
they?
then,
Okay, now
yeah,
now I gotta look this up.
and
Uh,
then I think they gave
but
Wolf a two-way contract, if my memory
oh,
is,
did they really? Eh?
yeah, they're paying him pennies, and it's a two-way contract in the first year, which just made me
Interesting.
sort of raise an eyebrow and say, is this guy playing in the NHL?
I still feel like he's probably on the roster. Yeah, I don't see anyone. I don't see
I want to
anyone
think
else
that
that.
that is right because, I'm drafting my goalies super late, and Wolf is always there.
Yeah,
I'm just afraid to take him because I don't like wasting picks.
yeah.
And if he's in the AHL, it's a wasted pick.
That's a huge waste.
Uh,
But the other thing is like later in the draft, I do like to target someone that has a potential path to steal starts that will definitely be in the lineup. So 2 years ago, for example, I took Stuart Skinner with one of my late picks as a third or fourth goalie, being fully aware because I'm a Leafs fan of Jack Campbell's volatility and potential to lose a starting job. I had seen Skinner in very limited time in the last year where they had Mikko Koskinen and Mike Smith in Edmonton. Skinner got some time, and I looked at his AHL numbers, and I was like, this guy is probably going to be the full time backup. But I could see him potentially stealing a starting job here. So I ended up taking him, and it worked out because that's exactly what happened. So obviously, that doesn't always work out that way. But I think when you're trying to find potentially a third goalie to maximize your point potential late in the draft, that's probably that could be the way that you have to go if there's no one else that's going to potentially get volume at that point. I don't know, Mark. Do you have any thoughts on goalies?
Not a lot of good ones, no. I will point out I've got the draft data up on the screen here, and you can see the yellow bars are the goalies, and in fact, there's a peak in round 10, which I think, for whatever reason, it has sort of become a bit of a thing where you get your goalies by round 10.
Yeah,
Which I don't think anyone here has actually ever said that that is the way to do it, but that idea does sort of persist out there, and it appears to be showing up in the data, which is just kind of interesting. Uh, you can see that goalies don't on average get drafted until beginning in round 6. So definitely not valuing them highly, which makes sense. With this scoring format, the second highest scoring goalie, if I recall correctly from last season, uh, the second most valuable was still ranked at like 133 among all players or in that neighborhood. So it's just not a format that values goaltenders, and I'm certainly not investing in them. I am picking a bunch of really terrible goaltenders. My most drafted goaltender is probably Peter Mrazek, would be my guess. Yes, there he is, right there. I've got Peter Mrazek in 4 out of 11 leagues. Uh,
awesome.
he might play. I don't know. It's a goalie. Who knows what's going to happen? So I'll leave
They like
the.
him. They like him there. He was a
I
he was a
know.
top 12 cacuffle goalie last year, so that's not
I
that's not
know.
necessarily a bad pick. He's just like
Well,
so volatile, but I don't know.
well, yeah. I'll leave it to other people to try to solve that riddle. I'm just taking goalies late and focusing on having the best skaters.
All right, let's wrap things up here. So, if you're interested in these best ball leagues, like we're spitting them out like crazy right now. There seems to be at least a new one going up almost every day. We're loading up best ball 16 right now. Um, if you're interested in that, head into the Apples and Genos Discord. If you're not already there, there will be a link in the description. And if you go to the tab Get Rolls, Nate has a post on there that encourages you to emoji the post in order to get notifications for certain things. One of them is to get notifications for best ball leagues. So just hit that notification. You'll get a ping when there's a new league coming up. and then you can get in there as quickly as possible. And there is a $5 entry fee, but you will if you do well, you'll either win your money back or make some cash off of it. So low stakes, but at least you get a little bit of skin in the game. And then Mark's got his tool coming out relatively soon, so that should make it even more fun. So Mark, are there any other aspects of the tool that you want to promote here right now?
No, I think if you've been watching us on YouTube, which you should be, then you've sort of seen what the tool can do. It's a lot of fun to play around. You can look up what you're doing. You can look up what other people are doing. Before you make a pick, you can look to see where your target player has been picked previously, and decide whether right now is the time to pick that player or not. So I had kind of wanted to wait until we had about, say, 5 drafts fully completed before I released it into the wild. That will probably happen fairly soon. And in any event, I think we should probably get this out there by the end of the week. So this will be available to everybody soon. And if you're playing in the best ball leagues, I think you'll have a lot of fun just looking up what's happening and using it to make your choices.
Love it, man. I love it. All right. Please leave us a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Make sure you leave a comment there. There is an option to leave a comment now on Spotify, which is exciting. We love reading those. Take a screenshot, send it to Nate. He's giving away Dauber Ultimate Fantasy Hockey packages. There are a few to give away, so you'll be entered into a draw there to potentially win one of those. So that's pretty exciting as well. And also, we like reading your comments. It helps us drive traffic, and we may even read your review on the pod. We've been known to do that from time to time too. So subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you're watching this, hit the like button right now and subscribe. If you're listening on podcast feeds, stop what you're doing right now. Go to the YouTube and like everything you can and subscribe. And then also if you want to take a sneak peek of Mark's tool, if it hasn't come out yet at the time that you're listening to this, take a look at the YouTube channel and get pumped up for when that gets released. Also, if you like our content, check out the Apples and Geno's Patreon. There is a special low off-season rate currently, but we're going to have some new and improved in-season tiers coming very soon. So a little bit of a tease there. Shout outs to the band They're There for providing our music. Their Spotify link is in the episode description. Follow us on X. Nate is at Apples Geno's. Blake is at Blake Creamer AG. Mark is at 18 Skaters. That's SKTRS. I'm at Just Josh and 41. Please practice safe stats and happy drafting. Have a good one, folks.